Amora had always been a good girl. Respectful, obedient, and focused on her studies. Her mother, Mrs. Johnson, never had to worry about her until she met Tasha. Tasha was new to the school. She was confident, fun, and had a way of making people feel special. Amora, who had always been quiet and reserved, was drawn to her. For the first time, she felt like she had a real best friend. At first, Mrs. Johnson was happy to see her daughter more social. But something about Tasha made her uneasy. She couldn't explain it, but every time the girl visited their home, the atmosphere felt heavy. One evening, Amora asked if she could stay over at Tasha's house for a small get-together. Mrs. Johnson hesitated. She didn't know much about Tasha's family, and the uneasy feeling in her heart grew stronger. Who else would be there? She asked. Just a few of our classmates, Amora assured her. It's nothing big. Against her better judgment, Mrs. Johnson agreed. But the moment Amora walked out the door, a strange fear gripped her heart. Instead of going to bed, she knelt down and prayed. Lord, protect my daughter. If there is anything hidden, reveal it. Don't let her fall into danger. That night, Amora arrived at Tasha's house, expecting a normal sleepover. But as soon as she stepped inside, she noticed something was off. The house was too quiet. The air felt thick. Tasha locked the door behind her. You're just in time, she said, smiling. For what? Amora asked, suddenly uneasy. The living room was dimly lit, candles flickering on a table. A group of girls sat in a circle, whispering in low voices. Strange symbols were drawn on the floor. Amora's stomach twisted. Tasha, what is this? Tasha's smile widened. A little initiation. You trust me, don't you? Amora stepped back. I want to go home. Tasha sighed. It's too late for that, Amora. You're already here. The girls in the circle lifted their heads. Their eyes were hollow, dark. And then, the whispers grew louder. Back at home, Mrs. Johnson felt something shift in her spirit. A deep, urgent sense of danger overwhelmed her. She fell to her knees, praying even harder. God, wherever my daughter is, rescue her. Just as the prayer left her lips, Amora screamed. Amora's heart pounded as the whispers filled the room. The candle flames flickered violently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She turned to run, but Tasha grabbed her wrist, her grip ice cold and unnaturally strong. You're one of us now, Tasha whispered. Amora yanked her arm free, stumbling backward. No. I don't want this. The girls in the circle stood up, their movements slow and unnatural. Their eyes, completely black, locked onto Amora. The air in the room thickened, pressing down on her chest. It felt like something invisible was wrapping around her, pulling her in. Her vision blurred, her body growing weaker. Then, something changed. A sharp, piercing sound filled the room, like a strong wind cutting through the air. The candles blew out instantly, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers stopped. A cold shiver ran down Amora's spine. The pressure on her chest lifted. She gasped for air, her knees buckling beneath her. Then, a voice, calm, but powerful, echoed in her mind. Leave now. Amora didn't think twice. She bolted for the door, her hands trembling as she twisted the lock. To her surprise, it opened easily this time. She ran out into the night, not daring to look back. When she reached home, she banged on the door, her entire body shaking. Mrs. Johnson flung it open, eyes wide with relief. Mom! Amora sobbed, collapsing into her arms. Mrs. Johnson held her tightly, whispering a prayer of thanks. I knew something was wrong. I prayed for you, Amora. I prayed. Amora clung to her mother, her heart still racing. She didn't understand what had happened back there, but one thing was clear, something had tried to take her. And if not for her mother's prayers, it might have succeeded. Amora sat on the living room couch, still shaking. Mrs. Johnson held her close, stroking her back gently. "Talk to me, baby," her mother whispered. "What happened?" Amora swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Mom. Tasha, she's not normal. They were doing something evil." Mrs. Johnson's grip tightened. "I knew it," she murmured. "The moment I let you go, I felt it in my spirit. That's why I prayed." Tears welled up in Amora's eyes. "Mom, I shouldn't have gone. I didn't listen to you." Mrs. Johnson cupped her face, wiping away a tear. "What matters is that God brought you back." Amora nodded, but deep inside, she felt uneasy. She knew what she had seen. The whispers, the black eyes, the way the air had thickened around her, something dark had tried to claim her. Then, her phone buzzed. She hesitated before picking it up. It was a message from Tasha. "You left too soon, Amora. But don't worry, we are not done with you yet." A chill ran down Amora's spine. She turned the phone toward her mother, her hands trembling. Mrs. Johnson's expression hardened. She grabbed the phone and placed it face down on the table. "We are praying tonight," she said firmly. Amora had never seen her mother this serious before. "Mom, what if they come for me?" Amora whispered. Mrs. Johnson looked her in the eyes. "Then they'll have to go through God." That night, as Amora lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. And far away, in a darkened room, Tasha smiled. That night, Amora and her mother prayed like never before. Mrs. Johnson anointed her daughter's forehead with oil, pleading with God to protect her. Amora clung to every word, desperately hoping the nightmare was over. But deep inside, a part of her knew it wasn't. At around 2 a.m., Amora jolted awake. A cold breeze swept through her room, though the windows were shut. The air felt thick, suffocating. A deep, uneasy feeling crawled over her skin. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from Tasha. "You can't run from this, Amora. It's already inside you." Her stomach twisted. Her hands trembled as she lowered the phone. Then, she noticed something. Her reflection in the mirror wasn't moving. Her real body sat stiff in bed, but her reflection was grinning too wide, too unnatural. Amora's breath hitched. A sharp, searing pain shot through her chest, knocking the air from her lungs. It felt like something was ripping through her from the inside. She clutched at her chest, but her fingers burned at the touch, as if her skin was scorching hot. Dark veins spread up her arms, twisting like shadows beneath her skin. Her body convulsed. She tried to scream, but her lips wouldn't move. Her limbs stiffened. It felt like she was being pushed out of herself. Then, the pressure stopped. Mrs. Johnson, hearing a heavy thud, ran down the hallway. She threw open the door. "Amora. Baby." Her heart dropped. Amora was sprawled on the floor, her body still. But as Mrs. Johnson rushed to her, Amora's eyes shot open. They weren't her daughter's eyes anymore. They were pitch black, void of light, empty. A slow, eerie smile spread across her face. "Mom," she whispered, but her voice was layered, two voices speaking at once. One was Amora's. The other wasn't. Mrs. Johnson stumbled back, her hands shaking. "Jesus, Jesus, help my child," she cried. Amora, or whatever was inside her, tilted her head, amused. "You prayed too late." Mrs. Johnson sobbed, dropping to her knees, reaching for her daughter. "No. I won't let you take her. But Amora just watched. Slowly, she stood up, moving unnaturally, as if testing out her own body. Then she laughed. Low, chilling, inhuman. She's mine now, the voice whispered. And before Mrs. Johnson could react, Amara turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, into the darkness of the night. Mrs. Johnson collapsed, screaming. She had prayed. She had fought. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Her daughter was gone. And she wasn't coming back.